SNESdrunk. Let's continue on with more Super Nintendo games where you might recognize the title or the cover art, but you never played them because, I don't know, the game just seemed like one big to-do, to paraphrase Larry David. The Might and Magic games on Super Nintendo were like that for me. I remember my brother either renting or borrowing Isles of Terra way back when, and I'm sure I would have liked that game and others in the series, but now, do I really want to put in all the work and all the time required for these immense games? Well, we're here, so why not? I'm not gonna lie, getting through all the Koei Super Nintendo games gave me the gaming stamina of a modern-day Steve Prefontaine, or at least Pat LaFontaine. But anyway, for those unfamiliar, Might and Magic started all the way back in 1986 as a simple first-person dungeon-crawling PC game where you manage party members and stats, all with a similar slant to stuff like Ultima, Wizardry, and of course Dungeons & Dragons. Might and Magic was a bit more streamlined and player-friendly, however, like for example, you don't need to memorize spells, instead you just use magic points like most other role-playing video games. In addition, there's only 3 alignments for each character type, good, evil, and neutral, but when it comes to the Super Nintendo Might and Magic games, things get pretty complicated. For one thing, the first SNES port was for Might and Magic 2, and it was ported twice by 2 separate development teams, one for Japan and one for PAL regions, with the latter being planned for release in North America before it was cancelled. Might and Magic 2 was originally made for Apple II, and it was ported to all the usual suspects, but the Super Nintendo got in line twice for some reason, so let's start with the Japanese version, titled Might and Magic Book 2. There's a handy English patch available for this one at romhacking.net that I've got listed in the description, and it's really well done, to the point that I actually found this old PC port to be a pretty decent experience. You start out with an auto-generated party with classes like knights, archers, paladins, clerics, and so on, and they all have varying stats in categories like might, speed, intellect, endurance, personality, accuracy, and luck. You press the Y button to bring up the map, but otherwise this is pretty straightforward. Just go around and look for stuff, talk to people, fight monsters, stop to rest and hope nothing attacks you, and then figure out what to do and where to go next. Really, this plays like a Japanese take on a Western RPG. There's manga-style portraits and a great soundtrack, and if anything, this makes Might and Magic play closer to something like Shin Megami Tensei. Unfortunately, it comes with similar flaws to that game as well, like the brutal encounter rate and the lack of an auto-battle function. You also have to pay money to level up, which is a bummer. I get why, so you can't just grind in one spot forever and then easily bulldoze your way through the rest of the game, but it still adds a lot of tedium to an already tedious game. Really, there's not much else to add here. The Japanese version of Might and Magic 2 is exactly what you'd expect from a game like this. You wander around, everything starts to look the same, so you look at the map, and then you wander around some more, look at the map again, fight some monsters, level up, and so on and so forth, forever into infinity, or at least it feels that way because this game is endless. It's good for what it is, but it's not for everyone. The PAL version of the game, simply titled Might and Magic 2, was released in 1993, and as you can see, it's got a completely different layout. This one is obviously closer to a traditional Western RPG, complete with goofy-ass monster design. Like, look at this thing. It's like Captain Novelin's abs got out of control and somehow melted his entire body. But yeah, the look and feel of this one are clearly an attempt to replicate the PC experience right down to the text descriptions. As far as the gameplay goes, it's more of the same, just wandering around waiting to fight stuff or waiting to run into someone who tells you what to do. One thing that's different that I should note is that you need to obtain clairvoyance in order to get the auto map in the upper right there, which obviously makes the game, playable. The balancing is also quite a bit different in that you will die a lot when you first start. This game is rough right from the get-go, but otherwise it's kind of the same deal as the Japanese edition, just a different take from a different part of the world. If I were to pick between the two versions, I'd lean toward the Japanese edition just because it seems like more of an effort was made to make it more console-friendly. But either way, whichever you pick, you're looking at something like 20 to 30 hours of straight, no-frills dungeon crawling, so if that's what you're looking for, then you can't go wrong with either version. The only official Might and Magic game North America got for Super Nintendo was for Might and Magic 3, Isles of Terra, originally made for PC and Mac, but it eventually got ports for Sega CD, TurboGrafx CD, and the Super Nintendo, the latter coming in January 1995 by way of developer Iguana Entertainment. Yes, the same folks that ported NBA Jam. This game is more story-driven than the previous games I talked about, with the manual laying out 8 pages of story involving the search for the evil Sheltim, who's scheming to turn people against each other so he can swoop in and take over the world, I guess. Even though the manual says something to the effect of, I don't know, the guy just seems crazy, you better stop him, man. Again, the game starts you out with an auto-generated party, and this is where you learn that the SNES port is actually pretty close to the original PC game. In fact, it's probably too close because the menu icons and layout here is really, really annoying and really should have been altered a bit to make it a bit more console-friendly. For example, if you don't like your auto-generated party, you can create your own custom party, but get ready for the most tedious experience ever. For one thing, the menu is all little icons, and you have to slowly go from one screen to the next, dismissing a party member, then recruiting another, then rolling for stats, and it all takes freaking forever and it's not worth it. And that kind of sums up what you'll be dealing with here. You're familiar with difficulty curves for gameplay, but Might and Magic 3 has a difficulty curve just to learn the frickin' menus. There are some nice touches here that are clear improvements from past games, and from past dungeon crawlers for that matter, like how you can see monsters approaching from a distance, which allows your ranged fighters to do their thing. Also, and most importantly, monsters do not respawn when you leave a dungeon or a city, they actually stay dead, so that's nice. You'll still run into monsters in the overworld, but you can actually find where they spawn from and destroy their base to prevent further encounters, which is also nice. I mean, the fewer floating Richard Nixon heads in the world, the better. Might and Magic 3 is also compatible with the Super Nintendo mouse, and it's a good thing it is because I don't think I could play this for as long as I did without it. I should mention the absurd difficulty this game starts out with. Again, just like the PAL version of Might and Magic 2, you're gonna die a lot to start this one. It kinda reminds me of the beginning of Ys 3, where you're stuck in a cave killing bugs for an hour before you dare go outside and actually fight. I should mention there's no formations in this game, so you have to guard your ranged characters closely, or at least cross your fingers and hope they don't get targeted, or they'll die immediately. To Might and Magic 3's credit, this game is freaking gigantic. The maps are enormous, and this is easily a 40-hour playthrough. Granted, it's a 40-hour playthrough of grinding away and leveling up and upgrading gear and such, but hey, at least the character classes are a little more interesting this time around. The Cleric and Sorcerer classes each have 36 different spells you can learn, with the Druid class not far behind with 29 spells, and that's to go along with tons of taverns, temples, blacksmiths, and guilds you can visit, so you definitely get your money's worth with this title. And man, the music in this game is so incredibly chill, it really adds a lot. One thing I have to mention is that if you plan on playing the Super Nintendo version of Might and Magic 3, do not play the original cartridge. When I was looking at sites like GameFAQs to find out more about this game, I regularly came across anecdotes like how some of the class upgrades don't actually work, or even worse, how the game will lock up and erase your save file. That's just evil. So yeah, play this one with save states. Anyway, the Might and Magic games on Super Nintendo are really impressive, especially Might and Magic 3, but they're almost too gigantic and unwieldy to the point that it clearly isn't a good idea to play the third game on the original cartridge. I will say the Japanese version of Might and Magic 2 is a fun curiosity, but for the most part, these games are an example of something that would have been good enough for the time if you didn't have a way of playing these on PC, but now you can find better. And in the case of the SNES, you're probably better off with something simpler and more focused like Arcana, or even Eye of the Beholder. I'd only recommend Might and Magic on Super Nintendo to those who just can't get enough dungeon crawling. Hours and hours of dungeon crawling, so if that's your thing, then go for it. That is all for now, and I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.